So what really worries me is in the age of digital information, how easy it is to generate misinformation. And so like I've seen pictures.
On today's shows, we're talking to the Boys of Blue security podcasters, Andy Jaw and Adam Brewer, who, like Megan and I, have a crooked path to cyber and are passionate about security. Welcome, guys. What are you
Thank
drinking?
you.
What are you drinking? Yeah.
I'm being seasonal, and so what I have, normally, you'd call it a White Russian, but I went with some peppermint vodka, so it's like a peppermint White Russian. Or I've seen some people say we should be calling them White Ukrainians these days, but whatever your name of choice is, it's a thing I drink around the holidays. So.
Wait, what? Because do Ukrainians like peppermint?
No, I just more
the
like
whole Russia,
acknowledging
Ukraine.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
Like there are a lot of places that like.
Do they really like?
Yeah. A lot of places changed Moscow Mule to be something like whatever mule, like
Freedom Mule or something.
Exactly.
I don't get out enough to know those things.
Very nice. And he separated it too.
Oh yeah, I've got the big ice cube in there. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, there we go.
Yes.
And so I floated the cream right on top of the ice cube, and that way it kept the separation.
Man,
this is a cocktail. This is a like somebody like took some classes or something.
I like the big ice cube, otherwise it waters down too fast.
It's connoisseur.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Andy, what about you?
Well, so I'm from Wisconsin, and there is a debate among some folks on what a Manhattan or an old fashioned, I should say, is. And so in Wisconsin, we drink old fashions. It's kind of the drink of choice. And so I'm drinking an old fashioned. But in Wisconsin, we drink it with brandy. And we always do it sweet. So we actually pour 7-Up or Sprite in here. So sugar cube, mashed up some cherries, brandy, and then some Sprite and bitters, of course. And I didn't have time to garnish it, but normally I would garnish it with like a slice of orange or something like that.
I'm not actually sure if that's anymore or an old fashioned anymore. Cool.
I guess I'm from trash.
I guess I was anyways, I was in hospitality, food and beverage, which included being a bartender for many years. If you had presented that request to me at a bar, I would have been like, what? It's not an old fashioned.
Yeah. Whenever I order an old fashioned anywhere outside of Wisconsin, I always have to ask first, do you have brandy? And then can you make an old fashioned with brandy? Because they'll always make
top it with 7-Up.
Yeah, and then I have to specify sweet because we like it sweet rather than sour. Because outside of Wisconsin, they make it either with whiskey or bourbon, and then they make it sour. And I'm like, no, can you make it sweet with, whatever. So, anyways, yeah, that's how we do it in Wisconsin. We're a bunch of.
Cool. When you were like, when you preface with, I'm from Wisconsin, I thought you were going to give us some kind of drink with cheese in it. I was like preparing for this is about to be disgusting.
If we were doing the show earlier in the day, you could have had
milkshake.
That Bloody Mary with, a whole salad on top of it.
We do have fried cheese curds in our Bloody Marys. So there's some places that'll put like a bunch of fried cheese curds on a Bloody Mary, which is amazing. Because that's the whole point of Bloody Mary is just to put a whole meal. Like if someone could just like literally put a T-bone steak on it, and you're like, oh, that's cool.
I mean, I do like a good snack.
Have you seen the Bloody Marys with like the cheeseburger on top?
Yeah.
What do they call it in Wisconsin? Because you order a Bloody and then they ask you, and I forget the language they use, but you get that little chubby High Life with it. What's that called?
Like a chaser?
That's what they call it. What's your chaser with it? And it's usually a High Life, and because it comes in that chubby little bottle that's like 5 ounces of beer or whatever, and it's short and squatty. And like in Wisconsin, they always come together. It's like another world. It's amazing.
We're like professional drinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what else are you gonna do in the winter?
No, I mean we have more bars per capita than any other state in the union. And we have more bars than grocery stores. That's how it is in Wisconsin. Like in a small town, you may only have 1 grocery stores, but you'll have like 5 bars. So we're actually, so like we don't have to, I'll get into it a little bit because I used to be a police officer. So I used to enforce the law in like OWIs in Wisconsin. And we're actually the only state in the union that the first offense for driving drunk or operating while intoxicated or while incapacitated is a forfeiture. So in many states, it's a misdemeanor. In every other state, it's a misdemeanor. So you get a criminal record if you get arrested for an OWI. In Wisconsin, your first offense, they bring you to the station, they fingerprint you and they arrest you and all that. But then it's just like, it's a fine. It's like a $800, $1,200 fine. They say, hey, do you have anyone you can call to come pick you up? And that's it.
Wow.
Like you just show up to court, you pay a fine, you pay a higher insurance, and you're good to go. There's no criminal record. It's like a glorified parking ticket.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
And
I did
then
not know that.
on top of that, you get 2 firsts. So the way it works in Wisconsin is if you get arrested for an OWI and then you haven't had another OWI in, I can't remember the amount of time. I think it's 5 years. Don't quote me on that. It might be 10 years. But if you haven't had another OWI within a certain amount of time, that still counts as a first, which means you don't have a criminal record.
Wow.
This was blowing my mind right now.
It's another forfeiture. And then, so what we say in the law enforcement industry is a third is always a third. So if you get a third OWI, that is a misdemeanor, and you do have a criminal record, go on top of that. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Huh.
it is. We just have so many people driving drunk that
I mean,
if you arrested everybody, we wouldn't have room. Like in our, we just literally wouldn't have room to house everybody. Yeah.
the amount of money that you would make.
Insane.
Well, I guess you make that money on the fine.
Sounds a little bit like my hometown, if I'm being honest, but it is crazy.
It's another world. I live in
Carly.
Iowa.
Carly,
Yeah.
what are you drinking? We're never gonna get to the cyber at this rate.
Oh, we
I know.
probably
I
should
was
do that,
gonna. I was gonna skip that, but I went simple tonight. Usually, I'm the complicated one. Red wine.
Yeah, you are. Well, I
What
have
about you?
a Prosecco because today is my birthday. I'm turning 30 again.
Happy birthday!
So great news about that.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. We just happened to be doing this on my 30th.
See, and
Oh.
you're the one that didn't want to talk about it, and I forgot because you
I
told me to
know.
forget about it.
But the thing is, we're so close to the end of the day that there's no chance that I'm gonna get like a barrage of messages about don't do it.
I'm like, but there's still a chance.
Don't do it.
There's still
Yeah,
a chance.
don't do it. So anyway, this is an exciting podcast. We just filmed a podcast with Andy and Adam for the Blue Security podcast, and we were like, you know what? Let's make a drink. Let's pivot right over and
Here we are.
just get crazy, talk shop, and have a cocktail. So yeah, here we are. And I would like to learn. We usually start with intro. So I'm going to position intro, but I want to learn a little bit more about how the podcast came to be.
Yeah, I can start. So Adam and I used to work together at Microsoft back in 2019. We were in the same OU organization unit, and that was the North Central unit. And I was brand new to Microsoft, brand new to security, really. And when I started doing technical sales and talking to organizations, I realized how little that most organizations knew about Windows security, about security in general, features that they owned that they didn't pay for. And at that time, when we were working together, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, and I suggested, hey, maybe we should do a podcast and like tell customers or listeners in general and educate them on a more massive scale on things that are available and how to take advantage of them. And then I went through one of Microsoft's reorgs, and ultimately my position was eliminated. So I went to a different company, and then we went through this thing called the pandemic. And during that, I had suggested to Adam, I'm like, hey, we're all at home. Like, what's a better time to do a podcast than now? And so we just kind of started into it, and we've been going since like September of 2020.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. How many episodes would you say you have?
We're over 150 at this point, probably over
Wow.
160. And
That's
I,
awesome.
I think when we were doing the Blue Security podcast earlier, one of the things Andy mentioned was when he does something, he does something. He's all in. And I'm the same way. We're both similar from that personality perspective. And one of the things that happened during the pandemic, a lot of people started podcasts. And I think
Yeah.
Andy and I both said, if we're going to do this, we're not doing, a couple episodes and quitting. Like, we're going to do it. We're going to be all in. And I was talking to someone the other day and they said, what's the hardest part about doing a podcast? What's something people don't know? And I said, it's doing it every week. And if you can't do it every week, it's recording ahead, it's planning ahead, it's communicating with each other, which sometimes I'm bad at because I'll be like, oh crap, Andy, I can't record tomorrow night. But it's that every week, like some weeks you're just not feeling it. I don't really want to record a show. I don't want to edit it. I don't want to have to deal with that. But it's kind of a promise to our listeners. We're going to be there for you every Monday morning. We're going to be there for you. And so it's showing up and doing the work. And to me, that's the hardest part, but that's also been the most rewarding now as we look back on it, that we've done it that long. I used to do a lot of distance running, and somebody said, what do you like about running? And I said, I like having done it. Like, what do you mean? I said, I don't like it in the middle of it. I'm usually cursing myself, saying, why are you doing this to yourself? But then I finish, they put the medal around your neck and you say, hey, I just ran a half marathon. That was awesome. Let's do another one now. Let's go sign up for more. And I feel it's kind of like that in the sense that I am most proud of what we've accomplished, that we've been able to so consistently put out a show week after week for 3 years across all the different stuff we've had going on.
That's fantastic. And now what do you guys, so you talk about you focus on just like Microsoft products or just security in general topics, like 150 episodes. That's a lot of different topics. Like, how do you continue coming up with content for that? Like, what drives you with Blue Security?
Yeah, I think the intent, because both of us are avid podcast listeners, and if you look at security podcasts across the board, there's a ton of them. So what is going to differentiate ours from someone else's? And what I initially imagined our podcast to be, and it's still fairly true to this point, is we wanted to give security defenders, which is why we named it Blue Security and like Blue Team, security defenders, actionable insight on how they can meaningfully increase the security posture of their organization by either taking advantage of something that they own or maybe implementing something that they don't, or something like, along those lines. And it's kind of morphed into, we also talk about some news items and break down our opinions of those on how, lessons learned and how you can check your organization for these. But that was the idea, and try to keep it short, because I've like many people in the industry, I listen to podcasts. I also go to conferences. And I think of a podcast like a conference. When you go to a conference, you get a bunch of information. But I think the best ones that I've sat in are ones that give me this aha moment, like, oh my goodness, I need to check my org for this thing that they just talked about. And I take it as an action item. And that's how I treat the podcast. Is I want to give my listeners, our listeners, actionable items that then go back to their org and be like, hey, I need to check this the next day or today.
Awesome.
To use an analogy, Andy is the play-by-play guy. So Andy does most of the show notes. He comes up with the topics each week. I'm the color commentary. So Andy shows up, he kind of gives the rundown. Here's the topics for today. He describes what's going on, tells the story. Then I'm the blowhard who gets on my soapbox and starts ranting about whatever is we're talking about at the moment. And, it's one of those things where we can bring the most value to customers by talking about what we know. I've been at Microsoft almost 7 years. Andy, I think on and off combined, you're at 4 or 5 at this point, with a little interlude there. But we talk about Microsoft sometimes because it's what we know, and we're able to bring more value to our listeners by doing that. But we try to be impartial and we try to be objective as much as possible. It's not something we do for work. We do it off the clock outside of work. And so we treat it that way. However, it certainly has benefits for work. I think
Yeah.
being aware of what's going on in our industry, what's changing, how products are changing, what the latest threats are, that makes us better at our jobs too. And so
Yeah.
it's something I talk about with my leaders a lot at work and say, hey, I do this podcast and it makes me better for Microsoft, even though I do it off the clock and on my own time. And so there's a lot of recognition of that. And one of the cool things that I love about our company is compared to others, they're so supportive of that. I think when I first came to Microsoft and I started following like a bunch of our leaders on Twitter, they're very vocal about their passions, their interests, their personal lives, things that are important to them. They're not afraid to get political or to talk about subjects that are normally considered taboo. We have a lot of leeway in how we behave in our personal lives as long as we're not acting in an official capacity. And so taking advantage of that opportunity that we have to go do a show and be able to be our authentic selves is really awesome. And it's an opportunity not everyone has. If we were at Apple, for example, we couldn't do this show. We would not be allowed to do it. And there's a lot of other companies like that. So let's take advantage of that opportunity we have here. And I think that's what we both do.
So I mean, I see a lot of similarities between you two, your dynamic, and Megan and I. And kind of like in the intro, your paths that got you here are a little similar as well. So Andy, you mentioned you were a police officer before. What is your path to where you are in cyber today?
And it was a long road. I went to school for engineering, and then I went into the Air Force. And that was my goal, was to just be in the Air Force for 20 years, retire. But unfortunately, the government had other ideas, and so I went through a force shaping as part of the Air Force, which is essentially a rift in the corporate terms. And so my job was eliminated in the Air Force. And they said, thank you for your service. You don't have to pay back any of your loans. You've done your duty to your country. Enjoy civilian life, after 3 years. And so
Wow.
so I was like, oh, what am I going to do? I was like, I think 27 at the time, my first layoff. And so I scrambled around, found a job as a production supervisor at a manufacturing company, did that for a while. And then I was in the reserves as well, because that's kind of a mandatory stop when you out process from active duty, is stop by the reserve recruiter. I was super bitter, of course, at the time. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with the Air Force. I don't want anything to do with the military. But the recruiter was super nice. She did her job and got me to sign on the dotted line. So I went and did that, which was really rewarding. And I ended up deploying to Afghanistan, coming back, and then the company that I was with was going through a downsizing, so I lost my job. Didn't want to lay me off while I was deployed, which was bad optics. But then as soon as I was back a couple of weeks, they're like, yeah, we're going to have to let you go. So I did what's a lot of reservists do, is just go on orders, right? There's different jobs, like contract jobs, essentially, for 6 months at a time. Did that for a while, which was great. And then I wanted to change the scenery, so I became a police officer. I applied to a bunch of different departments and was accepted at one. Moved back home, was a police officer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Did that for a while, and I found it to be a little, for political purposes, let's just say it's a little bit of a good old boys club. And I was not a conformist. And so I spoke my mind. I kind of pushed against the grain, and that wasn't looked favorably upon. And so I left, and I went into sales. I became a sales manager at Best Buy, which was great. Discount was great. And then went through another rift, which Best Buy did, and got another job internally at Best Buy as the Geek Squad manager, which then started my path into IT. Like Geek Squad and like fixing computers is essentially the same as internal IT at the help desk. And so I transitioned to the help desk at a corporate company, Trek Bicycles, which is a local company in Wisconsin. During that time, throughout this entire time, I was working on a master's degree on and off in information security. And the only reason why I picked that was my college roommate, who went into the Air Force with me. We took the same exact classes. We took the same exact major. Our goal was to just graduate and go into the Air Force. He was working on his master's because that's a requirement to promote to major. And I was working on it with the same requirement. And I asked him what he was majoring in. He said, this is where I'm going to school. This is what I'm majoring in. So I said, that sounds good to me. I'll try it out. And when I got out and, I dropped it and then picked it back up. And so at Trek, I was able to finish my master's in information security. As part of that, they recognized my work and hired me as one of the first information security analyst for the company. And that started me down that path. And then my former boss went to Microsoft as an Azure CSA. he recruited me to Microsoft. I ended up as a Windows or Modern Work TSP.
Modern desktop
TSP, which really was selling Windows Enterprise, and knowing all about Windows security essentially was how you would sell Windows Enterprise, right? All the security features in Windows. And that role was eliminated in 2019. I went to Exact Sciences as an information security analyst, got promoted to information security engineer, and implemented a lot of Microsoft stuff, but then also got experience in like deploying third-party tools like Okta, CrowdStrike, Mimecast. We were primarily an AWS shop, and so it was like all the things that anything but Microsoft, which was interesting. So I had to really try to get them to use some of Microsoft stuff. And then Microsoft said, hey, pandemic happened. Where are all of our remote people who know about Intune and device management? Oh, we laid them all off. They were all the modern desktop TSPs. So they created this new role called Cloud Endpoint TS, and a bunch of my old, coworkers like Adam and some folks that are in the manufacturing MFG said, hey, you should come back and work for us. So I did. I came back as a Cloud Endpoint TS, and then a security TS position came open, which I then took that position. So that's my
this guy's spot opened.
Yeah, exactly.
So how long is this? From when you start your story to now, like how many years are we talking?
I graduated in 2004, and that's when I commissioned as an officer in the Air Force. And so it's been, 19 years.
20 years.
Yeah, almost 20 years now.
Dang.
You only look 27. Like
those Asians, man.
Yeah, we age well. As the show
So how
goes
many
on,
times? Air Force, RIF,
I've been
Best Buy? Like how many of these are we talking?
I've been laid off at least 4 times.
Wow.
4 times in my career. Yeah.
Dang,
That's
I wonder
crazy.
perseverance is your thing, man.
I was just gonna say, like that your whole background is just the example of perseverance. And that's why I love like the way like starting here because we know you as Andy, security professional, Blue Security Podcast, all that. But how you got here, it just is incredible. And I think it's inspiring for anyone out there who might be looking for a career change or who's been in any of like the layoffs that have been going on over the past like year or so, like just to keep going. And so that's awesome.
Yeah, I always tell people the first time is the hardest. And that really it rings true for me because the first time it was like the federal government, the Air Force, my duty to my country. They're like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. And I was gone. And so that was
crazy.
Very tough. As a 27-year-old, it was very tough.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was just, I got into the groove of maintaining my resume, making sure everything was up to speed, and just having contacts. Once you get into the industry a little bit now it's easy. If I were to get laid off tomorrow, I would have people who I can reach out to. I have a resume ready. I have really good experience. But the first time when you're brand new and you don't have much, it is hard. And so I just tell people when they're at a job, you're always interviewing for your next job every single day. And so what you do that day matters, and you need to do 100% because even internally, right? Like if a job opens up, you're not just going to get that job because of your tenure there or whatever. Like the people who work with you know if you're capable of doing that next level job by you demonstrating that ability every single day previous to that. So if you're sandbagging it, they're not going to give you the job, right?
That's true.
That's such a good point. Adam, how did you
You're
and that beautiful sweater get to Microsoft?
Yeah. This is the Microsoft holiday sweater for the year. I won't stand up right now, but it's the Windows XP Bliss wallpaper. Everyone remembers it, the green, beautiful rolling hills and the beautiful blue sky and the fluffy white clouds. It's that on an ugly Christmas sweater. I have my Christmas party tonight and I just got dressed ahead of time, thought I'd wear it on the show. So my story, I was one of those kids that just loved computers. From the day I first touched a Apple II, I just thought, this is it for me. I love this. And I knew all along that I wanted to work in computers when I grew up. And so I went, when I graduated from high school, to the university where the first digital computer was invented, which you're all going to learn a little trivia fact here. You may think, where was the digital computer invented? Was it invented at MIT or Cal Berkeley? It was invented in Ames, Iowa at Iowa State University. And that's my alma mater. And
Really?
unlike so many people that went there who tried to be computer science majors and then dropped out because it's a really strong engineering school, or computer engineering, dropped out of that too. I went as a management information systems major from the get-go. which kind of made me unusual because everyone else was a dropout from other majors like engineering. But I always knew I wanted to do that. I loved the mixture of using technology to enable businesses to do more. And that always appealed to me. So I got out of school and I knew I wanted to work in IT, but I didn't really understand at the time, like all the different flavors of it, all the different pathways you could go. And I graduated at the worst possible time, right in the middle of the financial crisis. So it's one of those, anybody want to give me a job? I'll take any job. Any job works for me. And IBM was building a delivery center in Dubuque, Iowa, which sits on the Iowa-Wisconsin border. And that was my first job out of school. And it was terrible. I hated it. It was awful. And after a couple of years, I made the pivot over and started like where so many people do in help desk. And the organization I went to, they ran Lotus Notes, IBM Lotus Notes. Well, turns out I'm one of the only people on the planet that walked in the door knowing how to use that. The HR gal almost fell off the desk when I told her, I already know how to use Lotus Notes. So as I was there in help desk, I became an accidental, and this is a theme that will repeat itself through my story, an accidental Lotus Notes administrator, Lotus Domino administrator. I got administrative access to the back end because as I'm helping people call into help desk, I may need to do repairs on the server side. So I became a self-taught Lotus Domino administrator. And my passion had always been, because it kind of happened right as I was coming of age, so to speak, the introduction of the iPhone. I saw that and said, this is game changing. This is a computer in your pocket. This is going to change the way we compute forever moving forward. And I was right. And so I was always very interested in how do we bring these into the enterprise? How do we enable businesses to be more agile with mobile devices and cellular networks? And so the other area of interest for me was managing mobile devices. And of course, I started with like BlackBerry and BlackBerry Enterprise Server and all this garbage. That was terrible. And I was able to migrate this company from like all BlackBerry to all iPhone in a couple of years because it was clearly the direction to go. And I had a recruiter knock on my door and say, hey, this company is looking for someone who knows Lotus Domino and knows mobile device management. They have a job that's 50-50 both. And they want somebody to do that. And you're like the only candidate I can find, because this is a recruiter, that knows both of them. I'm like, yeah, I do. And so I go to this company. And the other part I forgot to mention was they had made the decision they were going to the cloud. This is 2013, 2012. Nobody's going to the cloud yet. This is a crazy concept. They're like, nope, we're going to
What
Office
cloud
365.
was there?
We're Office 365. We're going to go.
Even cloud, that's crazy.
It was
Right.
like at the beginning of like 0365. That was
Yeah.
probably very
right after it's been
Yeah.
rebranded from BPOS.
Mhm.
And they're like, we're going to go from Lotus Notes on premises to Exchange Online in the cloud. Are you in? And they said the reason this seat's even open is because the gal who sat in the seat before said she didn't want to learn it. I said, I'll learn it. And that's always been my story. I was like, I'll learn it. I'll figure it out. Like whatever you're going to throw at me, I will take a shot at it. I'll try to learn it. And so I said, okay, sure. Yeah, I know mobile device management. I know Lotus Domino a little bit. I'll learn Exchange Online. And so now I went from being the accidental Lotus Domino administrator to the accidental Exchange Online administrator. We migrated to Office 365 and I became a self-taught Exchange administrator. And then we decided, well, heck, we need to manage these mobile devices in the cloud too. Let's adopt Intune. Now, again, Intune is early days too. And I became an accidental Intune administrator because I taught myself how to use it and did all of this work. Basically was before the age of 30, the entire Microsoft system owner for a large multi-state insurance company. And my boss got terminated for bogus reasons and went to kind of a rival firm in the same city. I live in Des Moines, Iowa. And he recruits me to come over, says, hey, come over. These guys are so behind. I need you to run the same playbook back again. You know, let's get them on Office 365. Let's get them on Intune. Let's do all the things. Okay, I'm in. Boss, I'll follow you anywhere. I love working for this guy. And so I go over there and I'm not there less than 6 months before I see one of my Microsoft account reps that I know in the grocery store. A really great guy. Loved working with him. Go up and talk to him and just have a chat. No big deal. Didn't think anything of it. A couple of weeks later, he pings me on LinkedIn and he says, hey, I got something I want to run past you. Do you have time to meet? I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, we can meet happy hour after work. So I go meet. I think he's going to sell me something. And I'm right. But what he's selling me is taking a job at Microsoft. And the first thought in my head is, well, I have a lot of mean tweets about Microsoft I need to go delete before I can apply for this job. Because I had been, even though as administrator, had been critical of some of the missteps along the way. And this is still very early in the Satya Nadella era, right?
Okay.
And so I took the job. I was originally a technical specialist for enterprise mobility and security, as we called it at the time, which became an identity and information protection technical specialist, which became a security and compliance, which became security. And then over time, I pivoted and said, you know what? I'm actually more interested in like the sales side of this, the SSP side, as we call it internally. I'll go do that and try my hand at that. So now I'm entering my 3rd year as a security seller. And then I work with technical specialists like Andy along the way. But it's been, to me, no riffs. I have yet to experience that and hopefully never do, but we'll try to be prepared if that comes. But I think just unbelievable good fortune of like every time I needed a life preserver, it got thrown my way. And just to me, my story that I always share with people is always be willing to learn something new, because my opportunities opened up because someone along the way said, no, I don't want to learn something new. I just want to learn, do what I do and know what I know. And because I was willing to raise my hand and say, I'll learn something new, it opened doors for me over time. And even something where I never in a million years thought I'd work at a company like Microsoft, and now I've been here almost 7 years, which is crazy to say. That all happened because I was willing to be uncomfortable. So being uncomfortable is a good thing. It's like weight training for life.
I love that. That's so important. And I have always said in every interview that I've ever done is that I will be the first one to put my hand up and say, I don't know something, because I'm going to be that much faster to finding the solution. Technology is a field where you can't stop learning, kind of like medicine or, something along these lines, where like there is research happening all the time. There are 0 days happening all the time. You have to be willing to expand your knowledge stack. And the technology that was your bread and butter 2 years ago, it might be obsolete. I have one question for you, Adam. The grocery store you were in when the Microsoft manager approached you, was it a Hy-Vee?
It was not actually. So it's funny. Hy-Vee, I have lots of stories about Hy-Vee, but
they used to be our customers, right?
Yep.
Hy-Vee was my very first job ever. I'm from Quincy, Illinois, and I just looked Ames, Iowa, and you're like, hop, skipping a jump. Des Moines is the right below Ames, and it's the Hy-Vee headquarters. So I'm like, oh, this is Hy-Vee territory.
North Central, right? Like they were our customers.
Yeah.
I've been familiar with
my first job was at Hy-Vee too, Megan, by the way. I was pushing carts and bagging groceries.
Me too. One of the most valuable experiences, like when you talked a lot in your kind of how I got here story about learning and being willing to learn. And I think there's a little bit of humility in saying, I don't know something, I'm willing to learn. And it's crazy that this is coming full circle, but like, I really feel like pushing carts in the rain at 15 years old, bagging people's groceries, putting them in their car while they're harping at you not to break the eggs. I really feel like that instilled me a sense of humility and a desire to serve and do the best anyway, no matter how they're speaking to me. And I, like in a sales role, like even though we're in a technical sales role, I think you as an SSP can probably attest to this, is that there is a little bit of that when dealing with our customers, that we have to have that humility and kind of be willing to take the criticism. And I think Microsoft does a pretty good job of that. You were referencing having to go back and delete your tweets that were critical of Microsoft. But in a lot of ways, this is how we grow. We have a theme in our team that is like, we grow from feedback. It is uncomfortable. And you referenced that as well, that's the place that we grow from. If it was easy all the time, we wouldn't have to grow. We wouldn't have to learn new things. And so I think that's such an important thing that you pointed out there. And I appreciate you sharing that story.
When people ask me like, hey, is the growth mindset thing, Satya's growth mindset thing, is that real? I always say, absolutely it is. It's incredible how real it is. Where as long as you can say, hey, I didn't do the best I could here, or I straight up failed here, but here's what I learned from it, that is seen as a positive. Our culture really has pivoted on that, and it's true. And I was skeptical of that before I came in, but I discovered like we really live that every day, and it's one of the things I enjoy most. And talking about the humility, I think it's really easy to understand that sometimes customers have had a not great experience with us in the past. We're kind of trying to change our culture and change how we show up for customers. And if they're grumpy about things that happened before I came on board or I wasn't involved with, I will certainly give them the space to get it out. Yeah. Tell me how you're feeling. I want to hear it. I don't take it personally because it's literally not personal. Microsoft's a company with 200,000 people working for it, but I want to hear the feedback because it helps us show up better in the future. And I agree with you. Like, I probably didn't even need to delete the mean tweets. I probably could have gotten the job anyway. I don't know if anyone's looking, but it just felt like the thing to do. But
somebody might.
Absolutely. The feedback thing is very, very true. And, I think being able to take that and really internalize it and show up better as a result of it is a really important trait for all of us to have.
you kind of touched on it and like Megan, when you talked about the growth mindset, and then you expanded on it, Annie. It's not even just still about just like the technology, but it's about how you operate as like working with customers and as a person. So that growth mindset isn't just education and training. It is how you act as a human, as a representative of the company. And it's all encompassing and like opportunities to grow as a person, not just as a technical person. That is very attractive to being here and working here because they don't want you to be robots. That's what Chat GPT is for, and what Copilot is for. You are to be that human because you are that face of the company. So,
Yeah.
Andy?
Well,
Yeah,
Andy,
I was
before you
just.
jump in real quick, I'm sorry. I know I'm totally interrupting you, but
Oh, you're good.
Carly triggered the other thing I wanted to say when Megan spoke, and she said the word educate. And so I just wanted to add one last piece to my story was when I was first recruited to came to Microsoft, the thing that scared me, of course, was that S word, sales, like sales. It's such a dirty word when you're in technology, like I don't want to be in sales. Like it just, and the thing is, I met with a gentleman who is now uh, what we'd call internally at Microsoft an M3 in Microsoft parlance. He's well up the food chain. Brian Lynch. He was the gentleman who hired me. And we were sitting at lunch, like in a lunch interview, where he did most of the talking, to be fair. And one of the things he said to me is, your job as a technical specialist is not to sell. Your job is to educate. And I've always seen that as really what our role is. If we go out and educate customers and we teach them something and help them learn something, it creates such a virtuous cycle in terms of relationship, in terms of bringing value to each other, that the rest of it becomes a formality in a lot of ways, where I really still see that even though I'm in more of a pure sales role. My job, and I use this word all the time with customers, I say, hey, can we come in and educate you about this? We just want to teach you what we're doing. And if it makes sense for you, then we'll talk about that. And if it doesn't, then we won't talk about it. But I'm not going to try to shove something down your throat that doesn't make sense. I just want to educate you on what we're doing because we're such a big company and we're doing so many different things. Even if you're paid to keep up on it, it's hard to keep up on. And so we just want to bring some of that education to you. So you said the educate word, and I just had to jump in there and talk about that a little more.
That's awesome.
I had like a ton of thoughts as you guys were talking, but I'll try to put some of it. I mean, first and foremost, I'm really thankful that Microsoft's like policy is very lenient when it comes to things like this. I actually had a friend who works for AWS in the federal space, so he does security consulting for the DoD on an AWS for AWS, and I asked him if he would come on our show, really because I wanted to get someone from AWS to talk about AWS, really. And he said, yeah, we have to put in a request to security. We have to get it cleared. We have to have a transcript, like all this stuff to get approved. And I was like, well, we're not. The show was honestly, it was the one that Adam had missed. He told me that he couldn't do it, and I was trying to scramble to find someone. I'm like, literally, the show is going to be about like Twitter hot takes. It's a bunch of tweets that I found on cybersecurity that I just want your hot take on it. And he's like, yeah, I can't do it. Like, it's not worth my job, which I understand. I totally understand, right? Like, so I'm super thankful that Microsoft is fairly lenient. That being said, Adam and I don't go on our show and be like, yeah, don't. Microsoft sucks and don't buy our stuff. And but we're also not like in your face, like buy this, right? Like we tell them and educate them, and that's the whole point. But yeah, I was also going to say that my first job was also at a grocery store, but it was Kohl's food store when Kohl's had a food store. Obviously, you guys are probably familiar with the department store, but many, many years ago when I was 16, they had a grocery store, and you had to be 16 in order to apply and get a job there because it was unionized. I had no idea what a union was. I just knew that they took money out of my paycheck to pay for union dues, which I wasn't happy about. But apparently that meant that I got paid double on Sundays and, triple on holidays and all this stuff. And I think being in hospitality, I was a server for many years as well.
Yeah.
That humble attitude that you bring really goes a long ways in like our business today.
What I love about the TS role is it is that education, it's that problem solving. And then
That's why I tell every
definitely
TS that's coming on board,
Yeah.
I tell them, like, if you're a TS and you do your job well, you're never going to have to worry about quota a day in your life. You're just there to educate. Everyone else will stress about that. You don't have to. Your job is just
exactly.
you be a good representative of the company. You be a good representative of the products you cover. You paint them in the most flattering light possible. You solve problems where maybe this round peg doesn't fit in the square hole and you design an adapter to make it fit. Like, that's what you do. And if you do that well, everything else takes care of itself. You don't have to worry about it. It's great. I miss being a TS sometimes.
Yeah.
I think we're also in a very uniquely positioned situation where we are the company that we are supporting is leading the security business as well as some other facets of the industry. And it's very easy to get excited about the direction that the tech is moving. And I don't know, I've never been in technology sales for any other company, but I have been in sales in other industries. I sold cars for a little while. My dad actually owned a car dealership for a huge chunk of my life, and I kind of grew up around that. And I'll say, like, it's selling something that you love and you're passionate about and you believe in for a customer whose mission you really support. It's just a totally different ball game. It's hard to consider it sales in the traditional mindset because you're really just inspired by the technology that we get to work with every day, and you really just want to share that passion for what you've learned. And so I would say we're a little bit uniquely privileged in that regard, but
Oh yeah.
I love it.
I look at other security companies, right? And I will always tell my customers, I am not a snake oil salesman. I will not sell you something. I will not tell you about something that you don't need or want if it doesn't fit your business needs. I got so mad. I've never been this mad at a coworker before, but I was on a call and they were trying to position something and they're like, why don't you tell them about Sentinel? And I'm like, I literally 5 minutes ago asked them what their business requirements were, and Sentinel is not the thing that they need. So there's no way that I'm going to try to shoehorn that thing in, even though it might help me in my numbers. So yeah, exactly, Megan, is I can only work for a company and sell something that I truly believe in and that will make your company better. And like I'm completely inspired by the Microsoft stuff that I wouldn't go and work for another security. If like Okta offered me a job or CrowdStrike or whatever, I wouldn't go work for them because number one, I know that I'm competing against Microsoft, which is already a losing battle. And number two, that doesn't really inspire me, right? Like just selling another thing. That's just, there's 100 different companies out there that I could go work for, but Microsoft, there's only one that's leading this industry in that, regards.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Agreed. So I had a quick question to break up this Microsoft love fest.
I know.
It's
But
time.
I mean, I do love it. But so we've talked a lot about different things in regards to productivity, modern work, office apps, IBM Lotus. Where does productivity and security intersect and or potentially like butt heads? And maybe it's gonna be like 4 questions in one. So like where do they intersect? But then I mean, what is something that an end user, a normal day user, everyday user, right? Like when we talk about like updating to the latest iOS update, like, and making sure you continue to update your phone, right? So where do like security and productivity butt heads, but why is that important?
Yeah, let me start because Adam, I know that you have a soapbox on this, which I've heard many times. But I would say the best security is transparent and default security. That would be like my main thing. So tyranny of default If it's more secure, make it the default, because no one else is going to go and find it unless they're like, a tinfoil hat person like myself. And then make it transparent. Things that are easy, like Windows Hello for Business, which is passwordless, and it's easier for the user, but it's also more secure. So I think those two things, when it comes to productivity, it's got to be the default, and it's got to be transparent so that it doesn't hinder. But Adam, I know you've had experiences butting heads with security in the past, so I'll let you give your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the irony is, before I came to Microsoft, my last IT job, I worked for what you'd call the end user computing team, the end user technology team, the personal productivity team. I did not work in InfoSec in my last enterprise IT job before joining Microsoft. And when I came to Microsoft, I originally didn't see myself as, I wasn't in IT, or I wasn't in security, rather. I was, at the time, my first job, I was selling Azure Active Directory, Microsoft Intune, and Azure Information Protection were my 3 core workloads. So although all of those have a security bent to them, and I think identity more than any of them today, at the time, I didn't see that as, that wasn't pure security. Security was stuff like threat protection, Windows Defender ATP at the time, as it was called. And that wasn't me. And so I didn't realize I became a security practitioner till after the fact. But I grew up in the productivity space, in enabling end users to be more productive and fighting for end users to be more productive. A lot of my battles in enterprise IT were, we should do this because it's going to make people more productive. And so I've always carried that with me forward. And one of the things, you said you're going to break up the Microsoft love fest, but here we go again. One of the things I like about being at Microsoft is our core, where we grew up from as a company, is in productivity. And even in our mission statement, enable every user and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Sorry, every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. Achieve more is in our mission statement. So even when we're talking about security solutions, we're viewing them through the lens of, how do we help everyone be secure, but still achieve more? And I love that. I think once upon a time, those were really conflicting things, where it was like, well, we're going to roll out MFA and we're going to prompt people to pull out their phone and get a text message 9 times a day. And it's going to be super secure, but a complete pain in the butt. And I see so many security things today as it is possible to implement security that is more secure and more productive at the same time. There's so many solutions like this. Windows Hello for Business is a perfect example, where it's a more secure method of logging in and a faster method of logging in. It's win-win. And there's so many things like that. So I think once upon a time, Carly, your thesis is absolutely correct. There was a lot of push-pull there. Today, I see it as you modernize your security stack, you recognize productivity benefits as well, because modern security
100%.
is invisible to users, it is pervasive, and it's all-encompassing. I had a former CISO I used to work with who I really respected, even though the rest of his team I butted heads with. He said his goal was for security at our company to be like Vegas security. When you walk in a Vegas casino, there's plenty of eyes on you. And if you start causing problems, it is going to be dealt with very quickly. But it's invisible. It's not in your face. You don't walk in a Vegas casino and have to walk through metal detectors. It's bad for business. You don't see a bunch of security guards standing at the door. It's bad for business. It's invisible. It's there, but you don't know it's there. That's my North Star, is I want security to be like that. Like a Vegas casino where we all know it's there. We know the eye in the sky is watching us all. And if there's a problem, it will be dealt with and eradicated quickly and ejected from the premises. But for the rest of us, we're just there to do something, whether that's have a good time, sit at a blackjack table, we're not going to be disrupted. That's the goal. That's where we're trying to get to. So today, I think once upon a time, there's a lot of push-pull. Today, I don't think there is. I think if you're having that push-pull, it's because you're not doing it right.
Yeah. I use CASB as a good example too, because a lot of companies, they don't want their data to be accessed on, the proverbial grandma's computer at Thanksgiving, right? And so how do you allow productivity, but allow it securely? And so using like CASB, like Defender for cloud apps, where you can say, I'm going to give you access. You have to MFA. I'm going to proxy you through the surface, which is invisible to the user. It's a URL that you see, but the end user, no one would actually see that. They're not going to know that it's actually getting proxied. And then maybe you can put in policies to allow the user to check their email, maybe even download something and encrypt it on the fly with a read-only sensitivity label, right? So you're allowing productivity in an attempt to access something, but you're still securing it at the same time, and it's completely transparent to the user. They go and try to print it off at grandma's computer, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's read only. I can't print it off, but I still have, I'm still able to access it. So things like that, where most security folks in the old age would be like, let me just block access.
You say in the old days, but there's probably still some people that operate that way. But I mean, I think that's completely correct. I mean, like we were talking about before, like you can have a company furnished and given to you device. You can access it via like your iPad or your cell phone, or have so many different avenues to do your work without having to be at a physical location, or like hardwired into the network is like an easy way of putting it. And I think you're completely right. Like we've come a long way, that it's getting easier and easier. But one thing I like to say is change is constant, but change is the hardest thing to adapt to. When it comes to like the new Teams or the new Outlook, and people are, I don't like this the feature, I don't like this, I don't like that. And so you have like, so then sometimes security and IT will buckle and revert back.
Yeah, there's also like when it comes to device management, right? Like Adam and I come from the device management world. We talked about before the show how many devices we have joined to like Microsoft. And I get a lot of hesitation from customers and saying, oh, we don't want to manage, their personal devices because they're personal, and end users don't want their stuff managed. And like security should be like, well, if you want to access company resources on a personal machine, then it needs to be managed to a certain compliance level. And so even with
100.
myself, who is a security person, I had a Windows computer up until recently that was what's called workplace joined, which is you're signing in with your personal MSA, like my @outlook.com. It's a personal machine, and then I MDM manage it on the back end, but the identity that I'm signing into is still my MSA. Well, Microsoft came through and said, nope, we won't allow any more workplace joined machines. You must Azure Active Directory join it or Entra join it, and which means it's fully managed. You have to sign in with your Entra ID credentials. And I said, well, nope, I don't want to do that, right? And so that machine became re-imaged and just a personal machine. And so that was a compromise on my end because I didn't want to fully join it, because there were other policies that Microsoft was pushing down, like removing admin rights, and I didn't want to like have a machine that was personally owned with no admin rights on it. So
Yeah.
there's compromises on my end, there's compromises on the company's end, but and right now I'm talking to everyone on a Mac, right, and which is fully managed by Microsoft, but it's personally owned. And so if I want to do that, that's the compromise I have to make is, fully manage my machine. It still allows me to be productive on a powerful machine that I own, but the compromise is that Microsoft has to manage the compliance, and I have to be okay with that.
It was your choice, and it was an informed choice.
Yep.
I like that. But I also, in a sense, I guess like twofold. Like my iPad is not connected anyway. Like we talked about that before. But I have like my Teams and everything on my cell phone. People are like, oh, I don't want them managing my cell phone. I'm like, first of all, if you're doing something that you don't want like necessarily to be seen, maybe you should think about that. But second of all, I know Microsoft is going to be way more secure than I am potentially of maybe like a site that, I mean, obviously we all check the links before we click on them or anything, but it's going to be like watching what's happening via social media or like if something's coming through on my email. And so they're securing, like my device is secure without me having to really do anything about it? Do I care what they see, if they see what I'm doing on Instagram? No, because I'm not doing anything crazy. You know what I mean?
Which they don't anyway. They see you're talking to Instagram,
Right.
but they don't see what you're doing on Instagram.
Exactly.
And to your point, I get those nasty grams occasionally. It's like, hey, you need to install this new iOS update in 7 days or else you're cut off. And sometimes it'll be like, I didn't know there was an iOS update. And I consider myself pretty up to speed on those. But every now and then they'll get me where it'll be like, hey, a new Mac OS update came out. You need to install it. I'll be like, I didn't know one came out. And it's just everything is moving so fast. So I agree with you. That second layer of almost supervision is not a terrible thing sometimes. And by the way, I don't mean supervision in the Apple sense of the word with Apple Business Manager. I just mean a second layer of visibility.
Yeah, and that's where, and also like their terms of use and agreement, which, not necessarily everybody reads, but when you add that to your phone, they are just going to be monitoring. They're not going to be looking at your emails, your text messages, X, Y, and Z. But you're gonna get a Defender report for your phone, like, we've blocked this many malicious things from potentially popping up. Things that Apple or whomever like did not catch, especially if you're someone who is not security savvy or don't know or like want to install a firewall at your house to have your own personal and you want to trust just like the Verizon wireless router, etc. No, if you do all that, I wish I was like that smart and like knew, but like if you don't, but you work for a company that's going to do this, you get a little bit of extra security. What's the harm in that?
Good point. I never thought of it that way.
Because we are all security people, yet I am not a very technical person, so I'm not the person who's gonna like people tell me about like putting firewalls and I'm like, would you like to come to my house and set up my home network? Let's do this.
Yeah, like I'll turn my camera for you so you can see it, but that's my home network switch and everything off in the background.
Look at you with the gun safe right in the middle.
Yeah.
Not afraid of who sees that.
It's physical security and network security.
Yeah.
All in the same space. We love that.
I love that.
From a auditing perspective, you're covering the whole bit.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I have one question when we're talking about iOS updates or network updates, emerging technology. What is something you guys are excited for, maybe even nervous for in the world of emerging technologies, especially because we are in this time of rapid immersion, right? Like just everything with AI is very short within a couple years. Or if you want to, again, go back to Microsoft, maybe every like year there'd be some feature updates, but we're seeing them like every month or every other week. And like you used to be able to keep up with all the emerging technology. And now it's hard to, which is why that growth mindset is big deal. So emerging technology, what are you excited for? What are you nervous for? Who should put on their tinfoil hats?
Andy's got more of a tinfoil hat than me.
We love them here.
Adam, you want to go first?
Yeah, I will say, so first off, what I am not concerned about is generative AI. So one of the things I would encourage everybody to do, and even if you're not super technical, this was a great conversation, go to Run As Radio, which is hosted by Richard Campbell. He had Seth Horez on from Microsoft. And they walk through at a technical level how large language models actually work. And everyone, and I mean everyone, should listen to this because there's so much misunderstanding in terms of like people think we're on the verge of Terminator 2 breaking out and Skynet becoming sentient here in like 6 months. And that is so far off, like decades away, that we have nothing to be concerned about. We're beyond tinfoil hat. We're just, I don't even know what you'd call it. But large language models are so powerful in terms of like productivity gains and the benefits they have in the areas they're really good at. But at the same time, they scare me not at all, because what they really are is they're a Pez dispenser that spits out tokens, and tokens are just language that it's learned to stitch together to mimic either human language or machine language. It can be code. Their large language models are really good at writing code, like GitHub Copilot X, really good at that stuff. But they're nowhere close to sentience, and so they don't scare me at all. But they excite me a lot because I, as a salesperson, I use them all the time. Just last night, I had a customer I was talking to, and we're trying to set up a time for them to come to a Microsoft Technology Center and do an architectural design session. And I was kind of planning this thinking they're going to invite a whole bunch of people, and the ultimate, like, yeah, it's me and one other guy, we're coming. Like, we don't really do an architecture design session for such a small audience. And so I'm like, gosh, this is where I struggle sometimes. And how do I, like, firmly but still gently at the same time, like, tell this guy, like, you need to invite more people? I asked Copilot to do it. I said, tell so-and-so they need to bring more people along, essentially. And, I set it to, like, direct and long, and it wrote out this whole email about, like, here's why you need to do it. Here's the benefits of bringing more people. We'll have greater collaboration. We'll have greater engagement. We'll have different ideas be floated. Like, that to me was incredible, and it helped me do my job. Or just the simple things of, like, create a meeting with Copilot. I create meetings all the time. And so now I can click one button. It will summarize the whole email thread. It will generate an agenda for me. Like, this is huge. This helps us be better humans by using machines and doing what machines are good at. It terrifies me not at all, because it is in light years away from replacing my job. But it does help me do my job better. And so to me, that's something that really, really excites me. And I know that's like the most obvious answer in the world, but it really is something I'm using every day, and I'm finding a ton of value in.
Yeah, you also use it for your automatic replies to meeting invites, because I got one that's like, it looks like there's no agenda for this meeting. You might want to put an agenda. I was like, excuse me, Adam. And then I was like, oh, this was an automatic thing. Oh, yeah. It was like, there's no agenda for this. You might want to put an agenda so people know.
That's like the
like,
most like
dang.
snub, but like not like, I don't even know. I feel like offended by it, but also like, oh, touche.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Like, I was gonna say something to you, because it comes from you, but it did not sound like you, right? It sounded like an automatic reply. But I was like, how did he do that? And it's through Copilot. That's really funny.
Yeah, I love that.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't want to, Andy.
I want to
let's hear your
hear
answer.
the tinfoil hat, because I myself am a card carrying tinfoil hatter.
Yeah.
So I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Yeah. So there isn't a whole lot, like Adam said, it's kind of like master of the obvious here. There isn't a whole lot in technology right now other than the AI revolution, right? Like, laptops are pretty much stagnant. Okay, the next one's going to come out. It's going to have more RAM, a better processor. The next iPhone is going to come out. Guess what? It's going to have a better camera. It's going to be a little bit brighter. Like, whatever.
Breaking Apple rumors right here.
It's definitely going to have a Chrome browser and no other browser.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, there's not a whole lot to get super excited about other than AI. And to Adam's point, yes, I am excited about it. There are a lot of things that I can take advantage of. Like, I've joined meetings late, and Copilot's popped up and said, hey, looks like you joined late. Would you like a summary of what happened prior to joining? I was like, yeah, actually, that would be helpful, right? And I just today used this meeting summary for the first time, and it was super helpful. So there are a lot of things to get excited about. On the flip side, I am also very worried because besides being a security advocate, I'm also very much a privacy advocate. So I use Signal, I use end-to-end encryption. I'm barely on Facebook anymore. I deleted my original account, and I only reinstituted it because I have family overseas. I was very much against using a ton of Google services previously. I've kind of dipped back into using a little bit more YouTube these days, but I don't keep any of my history. I wipe everything off the face of the planet, that sort of stuff. And so what really worries me is, in the age of digital information, how easy it is to generate misinformation. And so like, I've seen pictures that are generated by AI that look, just absolutely beautiful, and they look real, but they're completely fake. And, news stories that people are firing journalists and laying them off because, oh, we can use AI to write the news now. And that is a terrible idea in my opinion. Like AI should augment human input and not replace human input. And so when you completely replace humanity out of things, you take that completely out of it. And so, like, for example, Adam and I just did an episode where we talked about how voice cloning is very easy with AI. And so that's a security concern because you can dupe someone into believing that, like a son has been arrested and then you need to pay this ransom or this fine or to get them out of jail, the bail or something like that. And so you can easily dupe people. All you need is a snippet of their voice, like 2 minutes, right? And so obviously I have a ton of voice clips out there. Anyone who's posting on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, right? You just need a voice sample, and now all of a sudden you can create a complete clone. And I listen to a couple podcasts. I'm a big political advocate, and so I listen to a bunch of political podcasts, and they've cloned, obviously, like Joe Biden, Obama, Trump. You can literally clone their voice and have them say anything, and it sounds totally legit, but it's completely fake. And so that really worries me in the age of information, the amount of misinformation that can happen, and we don't have any tooling right now that can really separate out what is real and what is not, like to the normal user. Like that stuff's not built in. So that's what worries me.
You take the red pill or the blue pill.
It's so real. It's so real. And we're like, without getting like too political, like we're, in my opinion, right on the cusp of World War III. And there's a quote that somebody made about, I don't know what weapon World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones, right? Because we're right on the cusp of that from a technology perspective. And we might not agree that AI is close to sentience, but I think we can agree that AI is close to being dangerous in the wrong hands in terms
weaponized.
Of generative AI, right? And that's like, the absolute last thing we need is for that to be weaponized from a nation state perspective, but we have no way of not allowing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I mean, the nation states are using AI to create propaganda that they push
exactly
out.
Right.
And but on a different note, in regards to like the AI, now as the only single person in this chat room right now, there was that whole point where people were using AI to create different photos of them and then posting them to Instagram or wherever. I was on one of the dating apps. Yes, I will admit it.
Nothing to be ashamed of.
But no. But
I met my husband on a dating app, so
I'm not ashamed by it. Just not necessarily something I thought I would talk about here. But there was a guy who did like half of his photos were some of those AI generated, and they look almost like just glamour shots with a filter on them. But I was like, look, I'm like, that is one of those AI photos. You must be out your mind. And then with the voice piece, like that just takes the whole catfishing thing to the next level. Not to say somebody tried to use like Tom Brady's photo. I was like, you must be joking.
But you could. I mean, at this like point, you could. Like it could be dangerous not only from a nation state perspective, but like as our kids, and this is something that I think about a lot. Like I have a 1, 3, and 5-year-old. As my kids are like beginning to enter the world of technology, like they have no concept of what's real and what's not. And it's even difficult for me to tell at times. It's like, how do we navigate that as parents? There's just so many like unthought of things. We don't know what we don't know yet in terms of risk with AI.
And it was super interesting because Adam during our show came up with, because we were talking about like how to keep our loved ones safe from maybe like this voice clone scam that could happen, right? And Adam came up with basically like a safe word, right? Like maybe have a safe word or a situation you say something like the classic like a prompt
like for
and
kids
response.
at school. Like
right?
kids
Like
at school, like you have that word for if somebody's going to come pick your kids up, they have to know the safe word. Otherwise, kids are not supposed to go. Or just like
a code word, back in the day where you say something and someone says, the answer response. And I was watching Instagram or YouTube, one of the things short, and it was this law enforcement gal who was talking about her kids, and she said, and this is something that is kind of related, but I also just want to tell you guys as parents that she had a secret emoji that she would have her kids send her if they were in an uncomfortable situation. And so they would send the emoji and immediately be like, yeah, I need to come pick them up. And instead of showing up and being like, please, mom, come pick me up, the mom can show up and kind of save face for their kids and be like, hey, I told you to be home at this time. Like, you show up as the bad guy and be like, hey, I need you to come right now. And they're like, what's wrong with your mom? Instead of like, oh, you want to leave because you're not cool. So it's kind of like, you
That's
get to,
smart.
yeah.
That is smart.
So I was like, in the same vein, I was like, maybe have a secret emoji or to have a safe word or a secret phrase that only you know, because then AI can't really clone that, right? Like, hey, what's the weather like today? And then they're like, oh, it's snowing in Denver or something like that, right? Like completely out of whack, that AI wouldn't be able to know, or the attacker or whoever wouldn't know what the actual
Very
response
smart.
is.
The
And
rain
don't
in
ever share
Spain
your
falls
one-time
mainly in the
pins when they
plains.
call you.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Adam, I know you
Anyway.
wanted to say something. You lit up with a statement. So let's do your last statement, and then we're gonna roll into rapid fire.
Yeah, let's do it. So, Megan, I just thought you summarized it really well. I was going to make the same point, which is I came at it from the perspective of, you don't need to worry, sentience is nowhere near here. And your point was it can be misused, or Andy's point was it can be misused today. And I think my final point of the subject is that's true. We need to find ways to watermark and classify information that is AI generated. The other thing is the best tool against it is honestly more AI, which sounds ridiculous, but is kind of true. It's almost like that mutually assured destruction concept. And that's where we need to empower our defenders with artificial intelligence as well, so they can detect either misinformation, or as attackers are using it to come up with new novel methods of attack, we have novel methods of defense. So it's one of those things where we have a reckoning coming, how we are going to deal with this. But the challenges, the pitfalls, and the opportunity are all going to be really interesting conversations moving forward.
That is a very good point. You said something watermarking. It's that immediately cues me into like, can we do this? Can we watermark AI products so that the end user isn't as keen to them, like meta tagging or something along those lines?
We're doing that today with Bing Image Creator, actually. And Microsoft Designer, if you have AI generated content, it has a digital watermark that indicates it was AI generated. So I think we need more of that.
Yeah, that's something that it's like when we get into the responsible AI, that's something that I feel like should become kind of an industry standard. I mean, there's no way you can take like a third party, because this is open source, right? So really everyone would have to have that same like sense of moral responsibility. And I know we don't, all, like, not everyone falls into that category, but to me, it's
responsibility and money don't mix most days.
Follow the money, you'll find the science. I always say that. All right.
But you're right. The last thing I was gonna say was, but while not everybody necessarily has the moral responsibility, but from a consumer perspective, if you require and ask and like of that product, eventually they're gonna buckle, because they're gonna lose their bottom line if consumers aren't using it. And so it's just that consumer education piece. But Megan, rapid fire.
Okay. So, we're going to we usually do rapid fire with like, give me your quick answer to this question. But this rapid fire, I've like framed a little bit differently. You're each going to do it. I'm going to say a word, and you're going to tell me the first thing, like word, like 1 to 2 words, or just short little phrase response to whatever pops into your mind when I tell you this word. And I have 4 words, and then I have 1 question to wrap it all up. So we'll start with Andy and then go to Adam for each word. Okay. First one. Are we ready?
Sure.
TikTok.
Unsafe.
The algorithm.
Uninstalled. Okay, good. All right. This next one, because cloud endpoint TSs. So this is just for you. Okay. Windows Phone.
Never had it, but I want it.
Missed opportunity.
I loved my Windows Phone. Okay. Shodan.
Great tool, and use it every now and then.
Trying to remember my certified ethical hacker training.
External attack surface management. Yeah. Go ahead, Megan.
Mine would be for that one. Our adversaries use it, so we should be too. Mm-hmm. Okay, last one. McAfee.
Oh. Uninstalled.
Legacy.
Slow. Jams up your machine. Never go full McAfee. Here. Yeah. Okay, this is the last question that we have for you. This is somewhat rapid fire, but you can take a moment to think on it if you need to. But with regard to cybersecurity, what keeps you up at night?
I mean, not a whole lot keeps me up at night because I'm not protecting a specific company. But I do worry. I think, we talked about being parents. I worry about our next generation because many of our peers are not very cyber savvy or technology savvy. And so I worry about my kids going to other houses and, downloading something or whatever. I have to educate my kids on cybersecurity, like on just the things that are they think are cool, like downloading a mod for a game, which is the last thing you want to do. But they're like, oh, these YouTube videos, they all show you how to do it. My kid wanted to install a mod, and so I vetted it. I'm like, this looks kludgy, I'll let you have it. Then the next step in the YouTube video that he was following was to install a VPN. And I'm like, no, we're not. It was some kludgy VPN client to some server that the IP address was in the video. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. You don't. And how many other parents would pause and think about that and even have limitations on their workstations that do not allow their kids to do that? And so I worry about parents. I worry about the next generation. I worry about our schools. I think our schools have some of the worst cybersecurity. They're using, shared names. And so I worry more about like my daily life and how my kids are getting raised. And that's what keeps me up, not really necessarily anything to do with like companies.
But that's so relevant because that's like why we all do what we do is like because of what's at home, right? So I think that's very valid. I think that's a great response. Adam, what about you? What keeps you up at night?
I bet Andy could predict my response, but what keeps me up at night, I am most concerned about small and medium businesses. To me, that is the least protected against cyber attacks and probably the most to lose. We talked about this on our show a couple of weeks ago where a lot of plastic surgeons' offices in the Las Vegas area were attacked and they stole patient photos, before and after pictures of procedures. And it's one of those things you start thinking of, like your dentist's office. Are they still running Windows XP? And there's so many. I mean, speaking of Windows XP, I got the sweater here, but there's to me, they can't afford to have like a staff of people, and they just, it's not, there's not enough outreach to them. And I see that as something like our company is maybe starting to try to pivot on, although it's just a really hard problem to solve. And I think that's something that's close to a lot of people. We all work with a small business, whether that's an insurance agency, a dentist, a physician, a specialist. There's a number of examples of what it could be. And they potentially have a lot of sensitive data related to you. And so to me, that's what probably keeps me up at night the most. I think I don't worry as much about the enterprise because I think between their ability to fund a cybersecurity team, the Securities and Exchange Commission requiring publicly traded companies to meet certain requirements, disclose breaches earlier, I think there's enough scrutiny in that world that they will be fine. I worry about those small and medium businesses, those single proprietors, those small partnerships, those LLCs. That's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, my
That's very good.
acupuncturist, is just a single gal and doing the business on her own, and my chiropractor, same thing, and they all have information about me medically that, if we're
PHI.
compromised. Yeah, so that's definitely I would have predicted that, like you said, Adam.
Do you want mine? Do you want my tinfoil hat one?
Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear
Well,
it.
The 23andMe data leak, which
Oh,
is, by the way,
gosh.
not the first genetic material data leak whereby genetic data was accessed in the age of genetically engineered virus. On that note, we'll wrap it up.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Carly, I will just tell you that's been my hill to die on. I've had relatives like, oh, let's do this ancestry thing. We can see. I'm like, nope, not doing it. Will not.
No.
Do not get that anywhere near me, and don't
No.
put it near any of my family either. Yeah.
I did it
am-
long
yeah.
before I was smart enough to recognize the repercussions of it. So we're
Sure.
out there. We're fully
Yeah.
out there.
Oh,
And
gosh.
listen, I was in the military. I get it. My DNA is probably already out there. Blah, blah. I don't have to add to that, and I don't have to give it to some private company that I don't know shit about. And as much as now with this YouTube channel and all that, everything is still locked down when it comes for me and security, and even how I operate in a professional social environment as far as LinkedIn. The only reason why I have it is because Microsoft made me. It's a requirement of being an employee here.
Is
But
it really?
I don't know. No,
Oh, okay.
but it was basically strongly urged and then continued to be poked and prodded at me to do one. And that was the only thing that could really be Google found on me 10 years ago when a deep Google dive was done on me. And immediately after that exercise, I deleted it. But so yeah, so that
Guys,
I
this
think
has been great convo
Yeah.
today.
Mhm.
Are we ready to wrap it up?
Let's
Thanks
wrap
for
it up.
because we
listening.
could keep talking, so let's
I know
wrap it up.
we keep going. This is so good. It sounds like we need to make this a regular
We
thing.
already busted our internal rules to each other, so let's just
I
wrap it up
love
now.
it. Thanks for listening to Cocktails and Socktails, the podcast where we make cyber relevant to everyone and unlock the stories of our leading industry professionals.
Thank you, Andy and Adam, the boys of Blue Security, to join us today and share your experiences and everything you're doing. You can find more details about the show, Andy and Adam show, all in the show notes below. Megan and I are here every week. So don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a drink. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.